All Spirits Eve, a festival originally held in Lewa Harbor to honor the fallen and the creed of the exorcist. It was holy to the city of contracts and unbelievably important for rich merchants to connect with one another, as the city's Xixing Ningguang held a very decadent party in its name. Lower families would costume themselves in spirit-themed outfits or wear imitation exorcist uniforms. Its overall atmosphere was spooky, as it was jolly. A unique festivity like this did not go unnoticed by the other nations, and while Inazuma did not have much care for it, with the Vision Hunt decree and civil war only just having ended, the City of Freedom, Mondstadt, had a lot of fun with the concept. In honor of its origin, Liyue cuisines, especially candies and desserts, were prepared, sold, or given away by vendors. But unlike Liyue, where the event was to honor the discipline of exorcisms, in Mondstadt, the event was mostly for entertainment, for both adults and children. Just like in Liyue, children would dress up as spirits, but furthermore monsters from both fiction and reality. While the adults had a lot of fun trying to put on as little clothing as humanly possible, while still representing the monster of their choosing. Of course, the more deviant costumes were isolated to adult parties for the nobility. Who knows what the hell was going on there? The centerpiece of this event was a large corn maze that had been set up in an unstable domain that would vanish about a week after Spirits Eve. The Knights of Favonius and the Adventurers Guild had taken great care to cleanse this domain of anything dangerous, a certain traveler having helped to an exceptional degree. Then it was up to the chief alchemist of the Knights of Favonius, Albedo, to set up the maze. Of course, an undertaking like this was quite bothersome. Him and his two assistants, Sucrose and Timaeus, would not have been able to finish setting everything up if it hadn't been for you. A Fatoui of all things. You and your fellow not-so-much diplomats had of course heard of Spirits Eve, but never actually expected to be semi-forced to participate. Forced meaning Il Dottore, the Harbinger, ordered the participation in the event. This was, according to him, due to the recent complications between the diplomats and the knights. You were a Fatoui researcher, which mostly meant that you were a trained soldier. While you were less educated than the alchemist's assistants, you were more bold and willing for sacrifices. It had taken Albedo surprisingly little amount of convincing to let you help, and over the next weeks you worked under him, as he took measurements and did small experiments. Of course, the alchemist didn't let you attend some of the more dubious ones due to secrecy. Those you simply took as days off. But working so close together with his little family was refreshing. A change from your usual Fatoui discipline. Quietly you lie down in the grass next to the domain's entrance. Your mask pulled over your face to shield from the sun. Spirits Eve was in autumn, the time when the leaves changed color and the air became cooler. Still though, when there were no clouds out, the sun was like a warm blanket. The smell of windwheel esters was in the air. You have to be honest with yourself. This had been way more pleasant than you initially thought. You'd be lying if you said that you weren't happy. You blinked, and then slowly closed your eyes. The noise of someone loudly thumbing down next to you awoke you and put you on alert. "It's fine," came Albedo's voice. You don't have to be worried. You sighed. Enjoying the evening? You huffed in response. I mean, I'm kinda forced to. You turned your head to look at him. You won't let me in while you perform your little miracle growth thing. He gave an amused chuckle. Before you had come in his life, he had laughed so rarely. But your dry humor was refreshing to him. Miracle growth thing? He raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting way of referring to it. You grinned. I mean, it is a shorter name. I was wondering, Miss Flores. Lydia Flores was your Fatoui agent name. By now you had fully embraced it. Would you like to accompany me into the maze on Spirit's Eve? You gave him a look in response. You don't have to. But see it as a social experiment. Social experiment? He repeated. When? He blinked. Albedo honestly did not expect to get this far. Shortly. I'd say shortly after we no longer allow civilians into the domain. He paused. 2 a.m. If any other person would have offered this, you would have thought it's a trap. But him? A blush appeared on your cheeks. Thankfully, your mask was hiding your face. Sure, I'm in, you said, trying not to sound embarrassed or too excited. But what is the occasion? He looked away, just asking. Also, a costume would be... That was all he said before the both of you were interrupted when the domain door opened. Master Albedo, you need to see this, came Sucrose's squeaky voice. The alchemist got on his feet. He nodded towards you before vanishing inside the domain. You soon left for the Grand Goth Hotel, spending the remaining 2 days under Spirit's Eve in your room, preparing a costume. You weren't quite sure what to dress up as. A Shnezhnaying Hilichral shaman? No, too revealing. Or maybe a mermaiden? No, you weren't tall enough. You did have a white dress you could cut up just right. But while going through your clothes, one thing fell into your hands. A purple kimono. Where did this come from? It was the perfect size, and just revealing enough for you to not be too embarrassed about it. Still, you looked at it with mild amusement and a blush. It was a little too perfect, and it definitely wasn't yours. Who had access to your room? After a quick brainstorming session, there were only 2 potential suspects. Il Dottore, who had the master keys to the hotel, and that one weird bard that somehow managed to be everywhere at once. Well, regardless, you now claimed it as yours, and if someone had a problem with it, you had an electro delusion to give them a piece of your mind. Before you began your date with Albedo, you put on the kimono, colored your hair purple with a tincture out of wolfhook juice and pureed valberries. Then you carefully braided it. To finish your Raiden Shogun look, you strapped a replica Death Wish polearm on your back, and just in case, attached a fillet blade to your hips to fulfill the outfit. You were really proud of how it turned out. If it wasn't for your eye color, you could perfectly match her. But then it was finally time to leave. By now, the only people left outside were adults having a blast. Among them, you saw Victor, a Fatoui agent who was usually stationed inside Mondstadt's cathedral. He was being carried by 4 men, Something that should ring alarm bells if they weren't praising him for something. Probably something related to alcohol, judging by the smell that wafted over from them. As you approach the gates of Mondstadt, a drunken guard threw a rude comment at you. Do not ruin your get-up, however, you remain calm. You soon arrived at the domain's entrance. Albedo was already waiting. He dropped his usual white coat for a beautiful black suit. Under it, a white shirt. A pest doctor mask was hanging off his belt. You approached him with a smile. And who are you supposed to be? Albedo chuckled and pulled out 2 small daggers from somewhere behind his back. I'm a Fatoui assassin, he said with a smug smirk. Little tasteless, don't you think? I think I'm pulling this off quite well. Then he looked at you. You, on the other hand. You gulped in an attempt not to blush. Your beauty is only rivaled by the sweet entropy of eternity. Your eyes widened, not expecting a compliment like that. At least, not so soon. Did I embarrass you? No, you hushed. The blonde smiled. You haven't seen the fruits of our labor yet, haven't you? You shook your head. Very well, then. By now the scare actors have left, and the domain will crumble in the next 48 hours, so we have the entire maze to ourselves. You exhaled in relief. While the polearm was a mere prop, the filet blade wasn't, and admittedly, you were afraid you'd cut off the hand of a scare actor by accident. Albedo sheathed the 2 daggers behind his back and opened the domain's door. Before the domain had been turned into a corn maze, it looked like an empty field. Due to a ley line disorder, the strange field had less gravity. The sky inside the domain was doused in a constant twilight. And you were met with something akin to an alleyway. Around you were large walls of green with the occasional yellow from the corn cobs. He looked at you and smiled. Are you sure no one is left in here? Albedo shrugged. Well, people needed to apply to enter in the first place. All scare actors were registered and currently returned to the city. Acting Grandmaster Jean took great care that every person was vetted in and out. Plus, the actors had maps with the maze and systematically skimmed through. No reports of missing children or adventurers as of yet. And he paused as something soft was touching him. He smiled gently. It was your hand. Albedo accepted your offer and slightly squeezed your hand. It's okay. I'm here. By the end of this, I will guide you outside. Okay? You nodded. Thank you. Finally you blushed. Slowly the 2 of you began. While no one was in the maze, the wooden cutouts of various monsters were still present, so it wasn't like there was nothing to watch out for. Without realizing it, you stepped on a tripwire, and a cutout jumped out of the maze, scaring you. Thanks to the low gravity and your body not being used to it, however, you fell. And thanks to the grip Albedo had around your hand, you dragged him down with you. Seconds later, the alchemist was lying on top of you. The fall didn't hurt, but your pride did. Worst of all, however, was where Albedo found himself. The alchemist didn't dare to move, or maybe he was enjoying it. Are you hurt? He muffled from between your breasts. You blinked, unable to take the events of the past 20 seconds all that serious. After a moment you said, Are you going to get up from there? He was quiet for a moment. I'm too embarrassed, he huffed. His breath tickled across your skin. Are you sure you're not just enjoying it a little too much? He didn't answer. You sighed slowly, before you gently put a hand on the back of his head. You know, I don't really mind. You smiled. Honestly, I expected the night to end like this. Finally, he raised his head. His face was flushed. You mean getting spooked by a wooden cutout of a lava churl, causing you to fall, and me coincidentally falling... He pointed at your chest. There? You shrugged. I mean, a bit different, sure. But nonetheless, yeah. I mean, yeah. I did expect your head to end up there. You smiled and placed your hand back onto his head, pushing him down. Now, be a good boy and go back there. He blinked. Yes, ma'am. Gently you combed through his hair. When did you realize your feelings for me? He muffled into you. I wouldn't say feelings. You spoke gently. Just being around you, it makes me really horny. He gave a quick cough as he tried to regain some of his composure. It didn't help, but it certainly made you chuckle. In other words, I like you, and I want to spend more time with you. You hummed. I like especially that you don't mind that I'm a Fatoui, and that you don't try to get any secrets out of me, not that I know many. I really appreciate that. You blinked and looked at the domain sky with a happy feeling in your heart. And what about you? Finally, you allowed him to raise himself off of you. His face was still as red as a tomato. As I said, it was an experiment. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, and I want to be certain. And well, I feel attracted to you. You grinned smugly. Especially now, huh? He nodded, his gaze returning to your chest. Yeah, especially now. You placed one hand on his butt while your other cupped a cheek of his face. Well, Mr. Albedo, would you like to continue the experiment? Yes, Miss Flores. I'd really like to do that. Albedo leaned forward. And you really are okay with this? He asked one last time. Groaning, you took the first step, gently pressing your lips onto his. He was softer than you expected, especially for someone calling himself the Chalk Prince. You thought he was dry, but no, he wasn't. He was perfect. You huffed amused when his tongue pushed into your mouth. Despite his initial restraint, he was a little pervert after all. But that was okay, because you were one too.